Hey everyone, in this video, we'll begin to add direct messages between users. We will break this up into two videos. In this first one, we will set up the basic functionality, and then we'll come back in the next video and add extra features like notifications, image uploads, and unread alerts. But that will come later. Let's focus on being able to send messages and create new conversation threads between users first. This will not be a real-time chat application. To do something like that, we require something extra like Django channels. I can make a video with that if there's any interest for that in the future, but for now we won't do that. Let's get started by updating our models.py. So first I'll go ahead and I'll open up my Sublime text editor, and let's jump into our models.py in our social app. And we're going to need two different models in here. I will need a thread model, which will be the conversation thread itself, which will hold the user, the receiving user, and any unread alerts. So it'll be a Boolean field that holds either true or false if there's any unread messages in that thread. But for now, we'll focus just on the user and receiver because the unread alerts will come later. And then we also need a message model, which will hold a thread, a sender user, a receiver user, a body, an image, a date, and then if it's been read by the receiving user. So let's start by creating the thread model. So we'll do a class, we'll call it thread model, and this will inherit from models.model. And here we'll go ahead and we'll create a user equals models.foreignkey, and they'll have the user on it, and then we'll have an onDelete, and this will be set to models.cascade. And we also, for now, want to set the related name equaling to a plus. And so on the user object itself, we're not going to ever access this thread model user. And so we'll remove the default mapping, the reverse mapping, on the user model itself by putting this plus here. I believe we did that before, but if not, that's what that's doing there. And once again, we'll go ahead and create another user foreign key. This one, we'll call this one receiver. This will be a models.foreignKey. And once again, we'll have user and onDelete equals models.cascade. And once again, we'll do related name equals a plus. And that's all for our thread model. We'll come back and add more later, but for this first video, that's all we need. Let's go ahead and create a message model as well. So we'll create our message model here. It'll inherit from models.model, like all of our models do. And then inside of this model, first we want a thread foreign key. So we'll create a variable called thread, set it equal to models.foreignKey. And this will be have a type of thread model. And a related name, once again, we don't need the reverse mapping, so we'll get rid of it with a plus. And then onDelete, so that equal to models.cascade. And then we also want to leave this blank if we wanted to. So we'll put blank equals true, null equals true. And so we want this field here so that we can, link a message to a thread. So we want to be able to tell where this message belongs. And so we'll save it to a thread model so we know where to actually display the message at later on. And so next we want to hold two user PKs or two user foreign keys. So one will be a sender underscore user, and this will be models.foreignKey again. And I spelled foreign key wrong in all of these. Let's go ahead and fix that. There we go. And then this will have a user model. This will hold users. This will hold a user. We'll have an onDelete equaling models.cascade again. And then once again, related name equals a plus to remove the mapping. I'm going to go and copy this one more time because it's going to be almost exactly the same. So we'll copy that, come down here and paste that there. And let's change the sender user to receiver user. And this will be the user that's receiving the message. Now below these three fields here, we want to add a body. So we'll put body equals models.charField. Max length equals 100. Actually, we'll do 1,000 because messages could be long. And then we'll go ahead and add an image field. And this field we'll add for now, although we're not going to use it yet. We'll use it later. Image field, And inside of here, I'll put upload to, and I'll set this equal to, let's call it message photos, I guess. Or actually, you want to go upload slash message photos. So we'll do uploads slash message photos. And then we also want to add a blank equals true and a null equals true. Go ahead and create that directory real quick. Inside of our uploads folder, we'll create a new folder and call it message_photos. And that will be used later. And also just a quick note, if you don't have Pillow installed, you'll need to install that for this image field to work. We've already used this image field multiple times, so we should have installed it if you've been following along. But if not, make sure you install that now. Just do pip install Pillow with a capital P. Next, we'll add a date field. So date equals models.datetime field. A default equaling time zone.now. And so this will be the date the message was sent. We added a default of time zone.now. That way, if we don't show in our form, which we won't, it will automatically default to the current time. So every message will have the current time that it was when it was sent. And below that, I'll add an isRead. And also, I won't use this yet, but we'll use this later. We'll do a models.boolean field and a default equaling false. So if the receiving user has read it, this will be set to true. Otherwise, it's set to false. Let's go ahead and save that. And that should be it for our models. Let's go ahead and migrate these changes. So I'll stop the server. I'll go ahead and run Python 3 manage.py make migrations. And I'll run Python manage.py migrate. I'll go ahead now and run the server. And it looks like everything's good. Let's go reload the page just to double check. Reload this page and it looks good. Okay. So now that's done, let's go ahead and focus on making our threads work. So we want to add a way to create a new conversation thread and then view all of your threads. So our inbox will be just a list of these different thread model objects for every conversation you have with the different users. You can click on one and it'll give you a detailed view of every message in that thread. So first, let's create a way to display these and create them. So let's go into our views.py to do this. We'll come down here to the bottom and let's create a new class. So do a class and we'll start with list threads. We'll inherit view. And inside this list threads, we need just a get method. We just want to display data. We're not going to send any data back with a post method. So all we need is just a get method. So do a def get. And we'll pass in self, request, star args, and star quargs. Inside of here, we want to go ahead and get all the threads that is linked to this user, where they're either the user on the thread or the receiver on the thread. So if you look at our models again real quick, every thread has two users, a receiver and a user and a receiver. And we want this thread to show up for both these users. They can both access the thread. And so to do this, we can create a filter. So I'll type threads equals thread model, which I need to import, which I'll do it here in a second, .objects, .filter. And then we need to use the queue object. I believe we used it before, but if not, I'll explain it here in a second. So do a queue, and then in parentheses, we'll do user equals request.user. And then outside the parentheses, we'll do a pipe for or, and then we'll do queue requests or receiver equals request.user. So what we're saying here is filter this out by anything where the user equals the request.user or the receiver equals the request.user. And this queue object allows us to create these more complex queries here that we're using here. Okay, with that done, let's go import these two things. So we got to make sure we have thread model imported as well as queue. So up here at the top, queue is already imported. So let's just import a thread model from our models. So right here, I'll import thread model. We'll save that. And now down here, inside of our view, now that we have all of our threads, we want to just return them in the context and render the template. So we'll do context equals, and this will be, we'll do threads, and that will be equal, or set the threads. And then down here, we'll do return render, and we'll pass in our request, pass in our template name. So we'll do social/inbox .html, which we'll create here in a second, and pass in our context. And that's it for that first view. Now let's go ahead and let's add a create thread view. So we'll add this below this. We'll go ahead and create a new class. So we'll do a class create thread. We'll pass in a view again. And this will need two different methods. We'll need a get method to display the form and a post method to be able to actually send this form data back to create the thread. So first, let's just set this up. We'll do a def get. It'll pass in self request star args and star quargs. And for now, let's put a pass, and we'll create a def post, and this will pass in self request star args and star quargs. And once again, we'll put a pass here for now. And the reason I'm stopping here is because we need to create the form. Right now, we don't have a form to use for this view. So let's go into our forms.py and create a form for that. So down here at the bottom, this will be very, very simple. We create more complex forms here for our posts and comments, but this will be a much more simple form. We don't need a model form. We just need a simple regular form. So we'll create a class thread form, and this will inherit from forms.form, not model form, but form. And inside of this form here, we'll have one field. It'll be a username. We'll set this equal to forms.char field, and the label will be set to nothing to remove the label, and we'll set a max length of, we'll say probably 100 is as long as the usernames will be. So put that in there. And that's all we need for our form. That's the only line we need. So we can save that. We can come back and add this form to our view. So inside of our get method first, we're going to go ahead and just instantiate the new form without any data in it because we don't have any data yet. So we'll just do form equals, and we'll do thread form, which we need to import just like that. And now up here at the top in our forms, we'll import a thread form. From down here, and then after we have our form, we can go ahead and just put this form in the context and render the template. So we'll do a context equals form, and we'll pass in form. And then down here, we'll go ahead and do return render, pass in requests, and we'll create a template. We'll call it social/create_thread.html. And then we'll go and pass in our context. And that's it for our get method. Now let's go ahead and create the post method to actually handle creating a new thread. So inside of our post, we'll go ahead and get the form with its data from the request. So we'll do form equals thread form and pass in the request.post to get the post data from the form or from our post request. Now we have that data, we can pull out the username. So the username equals request.post.get and pass in what we called our field in our form here. In this case, we called it username. So in here, I'll go ahead and pass in quotes, username to get the username from that form. Next, we'll need to do two things. We'll need to get the receiver user, which will be just the user with the same username that we got from our form. We're going to check if that exists. If not, we'll go ahead and just redirect back to this page with an empty form. And later I'll show a message. But for now, we're not going to do anything with that. So it just won't go through right now. And then once we have that data, we can go ahead and see if a thread already exists. If it does, we'll just redirect to that thread. And if not, we'll go ahead and create a new thread. So because we want to check if this exists, we don't want Django to throw an error if it doesn't exist. So we can check for this with a try except statement in Python. So we can type try and then a colon, and then we put our code here. And then once we're done with that, we can put an except and put any code here to run after it catches it. So if there's an error, if it can't find a user, it'll come down to this block down here. But first, let's fill out the try block. So we'll do a receiver equals user.objects.get, and we'll pass in username equals username. So we're just looking for a user that matches this username. And just double check here, do we have user imported? We do not. So we need to import user real quick as well. So up here at the top, we will import from Django.contrib.auth.models import user. And we'll come down here. And now we have that user object here available to use. Next, we want to try to find a thread that matches these two users. So we want to find one that matches the request.user as well as this receiver user we just got. So we can do this by adding an if statement. So we'll do if thread model.objects.filter user equals request.user, and then we'll do receiver equals receiver. But we also want to check if there is a thread that matches the reverse. So either this or the opposite. So we'll go ahead and do or thread model.objects.filter user equals receiver, or receiver, and then receiver equals the request.user. So we're just checking both sides if there is a current thread that matches either of those two queries. And we actually want to put dot exists at the end of all these. So dot exists. That will tell us if there is or isn't one. So dot exists there. And over here, dot exists. If one does exist, we want to go ahead and get that thread. So do a thread equals. Actually, let's break this up. So we'll go ahead and take this right here, and we'll cut this to a new line. This will make it a little easier, hopefully. So we'll do an if this, and then down here we'll do an elif. So if that's not the case, does the opposite exist? And we'll do that as well. But first, let's go to this first one. And if the user matches the request.user and the receiver matches the receiver, let's get that thread. So we'll go ahead and do thread equals thread model.objects.filter user equals the request.user, and the receiver equals the receiver. So we'll filter by that, and then we'll go ahead and grab the first one out of that list. And then after we do that, we want to go ahead and redirect to this. So we'll do return redirect, and we'll return to the thread, and we'll pass in the pk equals thread.pk. And this thread string here will be the name of the URL that we'll create later. But for now, we'll put it in here just so it works when we have that added. Real quick, let's make sure we have redirect imported. I don't remember if we did or not. Does not look like it anywhere. It's not imported, so let's go ahead and import that real quick. So up here, we'll do a from Django.shortcuts import redirect. That will allow us to use redirect. Now down here, after we redirect to that URL, let's go and check the opposite. So if the opposite exists, then we'll do a thread equals thread model.objects.filter user equals receiver, and receiver equals request.user. We'll go ahead and grab the first one and redirect the same way. So return redirect thread, and we'll do pk equals thread.pk. Okay, perfect. Now with those two added, we can go ahead and add the logic to actually create the thread if one doesn't exist. So since we use return, this code down here won't run unless there isn't a thread. So we can go ahead and just put if form.is valid to check if the form is valid. If it is, we can go ahead and create the thread. So we'll do thread equals thread model where we'll set the user equaling to request.user, and we'll set the receiver equaling to the receiver. And then we can go ahead and save that thread. So do a thread.save to save that in the database. And now once we have that, we can go ahead and redirect to this new thread. So do a return redirect to thread where the pk equals, once again, thread.pk. And now if there is an error, that means the user doesn't exist. And so what we'll do here, we'll just return redirect create dash thread. So we'll just return back with an empty form from the try again. And later we might add some error checking there, but for now we'll just do that just for the basic functionality. That's all we need for this view here to create a thread. So now we have those two added. Let's go ahead and create the URL pattern for these views. So we'll go into our urls.py. So first we'll come to the top and we'll come over here and we'll import create thread, and we'll import thread or list thread, so we called it. With those two things imported, we can go and add URL patterns for them. So down here at the bottom, I'll create a new path, and this will be inbox / and that will list all of our threads. So do list threads dot as underscore view, give it a name equaling to inbox, and then we'll go and create another path. This will be to create a new thread. So we'll do inbox / create dash thread, and then we'll do list threads dot as view name equaling create thread. And now we have both of our URLs created. Let's go ahead and create our templates. So in our views, we created two templates. We created one called create thread and one called inbox. So we'll go ahead and make both those files now. So inside of our template social, we'll create a new file. We'll save this one as inbox.html. And then we'll go ahead and create another one here. And we'll save this one as create underscore thread.html right there. Let's start with our inbox. So go to that file first. So first we want to go ahead and extend landing based HTML template, and then we'll create a content block. So up here at the top, we'll go ahead and do extends landing / base.html. Now down here, we'll go ahead and use our content block. So we'll use our block content, and below that, we'll do an in block content. Now inside of here, let's go and create a container. So do a div with a class equaling to container. Inside this container, we'll go ahead and create a row, div class equals row. Inside this row, we'll create a column, div class equals column-md-12 to span the entire screen width, add a padding -5 to give it some spacing. And now inside of here, we'll go ahead and create an h3. This will be our header, and this will just say your conversations. We'll close off this tag. We'll close off the div. We'll close off the row. And now we'll create another row. So down here, we'll create a div, a class equal to row. Inside this row, we'll create a column again. So class equals column-md-12. And once again, we'll add padding -5. Inside of this column here, we'll create our form. And this form will hold a button to start a new conversation. So do a form with a method equaling get, an action equaling a URL pattern. So we'll do our Django template syntax. This will be URL and then create -thread, and this should be in quotes. And that's all for our form tag. Inside of our form here, we'll create a button. This button will have a class equaling to btn-light, and a padding -3. I'll have a type equaling to submit. So we're going to submit this form here. And then we'll have some text in here. It'll be start a conversation. I'll close off that button, and then we'll close off this form. We'll close off this div, and we'll close off this div as well. And now below this, we want to go ahead and list out all of the threads. So in our view here, we passed in the threads into our context here. So we have access to those. So we're going to use that here. We're going to go and loop through them. So we'll do for thread in threads.all to create a list that we can iterate over. Now inside of this for loop here, actually first we'll go ahead and close off the for loop. Do an in for. But now inside this for loop here, we're going to go ahead and create a new row to list out all these threads. So do a div class equaling row with a margin bottom of 3. Inside of this div here, we'll create a column with a card. So we'll do a div class equaling card column dash md dash 12. And then we'll do a padding dash 5 and a shadow dash sm for small to add a shadow to this card. Inside of this card here, first we'll create an h5, and this will have the thread title, which will be the receiver user. So we'll do thread.receiver. And we'll go ahead and put, actually, let's put the thread.user, and then we'll put a dash, and we'll do a thread.receiver for now. You could have some logic to check which is the current logged in user and show the opposite, but for now, we'll just put that. Again, right now we're just going for basic functionality, get everything working. We'll come back and add some more changes later. Now below this heading here, we're at a link. So we'll do a class, an A tag with a class of stretched link. And this will stretch it across the entire card. So it'll make this whole card clickable. And now inside of this link here, we'll add an href. Set that equal to URL and thread. And we'll pass in the thread.pk of the current thread we're on. And then we can go and close off the A tag. And so I'll just make this entire card here clickable. It will take us to the actual thread itself. This thread link we haven't made yet, so that will throw an error. But once we make that, this will hopefully work, and we'll have a link to our actual thread itself. Let's close off this div and close off this div as well. And I think that should be it. We need to close off this container as well outside of the for loop, but I think that's the last step. Let's go ahead and save that now. That looks good. Let's go ahead and jump into our create thread and make that one now. So what we want to do here is we want to go ahead and extend our base first, like we normally do. So we'll do extends landing / base.html. Now we also want to load in our crispy forms tag since we'll have a form on this page. So this one will have load crispy forms tags. And now below this, we'll go ahead and use our content block. So do a block content. We'll go and close off the content block down here. End block content. Now inside of here, let's go ahead and first we need to add our container. So do a div class equals container. Inside this container, let's go and add our header. So we'll create a row for this. And then we'll create a column in this row. And then we'll add a padding -5 right there. And now inside of this, we'll add h3. And this will have your conversations. Or actually, we'll set this to start a conversation. Like that. And then we'll go ahead and close off this div and close off this div as well. And now actually, we'll add one more thing above this too. And a lot of our pages on the social network page, we have like back to your profile, back to the post or whatever it is. Let's add a back to your inbox button above this. So I'm going to copy this whole row here. I'm going to paste this right above it. And what we'll do in here is we'll get rid of this h3 here and replace it with an a tag, the href. For now, we'll have it go to the inbox. So we'll go in here and we'll do URL inbox. and we'll add a class equaling to btn dash light, and in here we'll do back to your inbox. Close off that tag. There we go. And now below both of these rows here, we can go ahead and actually add the form to create a new thread. So what we'll have here is another div, a class of row. We're at the class of justify content center to center this form. We're also going to add some top and bottom margin. We'll do a margin top -3 and a margin bottom -5. Now inside of this column here, or inside this row here, we'll create a new column. So we'll do a class equals column -md -5 and a column -sm -12. Inside of this column, we'll create a new form with a method equaling post. And now inside of this post method, first, since it's a post method with a form, we need our CSRF token. So we'll add that here with just CSRF underscore token. And now right here, I'm going to add a paragraph tag just to give a little extra information to the user. And I'll say enter the username for the person you would like to talk to, and close off that p tag. And now below this, we'll go ahead and add our form in here. So inside of our views, in our post method, or in our get method, we already have this form passed in to this template, so we have access to it here. So I'll type form, and I'll use the crispy filter, or the crispy forms filter here to make it look better. So I'll add crispy right there. Now below this, let's add a button to actually submit this form. So I'll first have a div with a class of d-grid and gap-2. Since we're using Bootstrap 5, we need to add that different class here to make the button span across the entire block. Now we'll add a button with a class equaling to btn-success and a margin top -3. We also want to add a type equaling submit. And then finally, we'll put continue to create that thread, and put a closing button tag there, and I close off our div there, close off our form there, close off our div there, and we'll need a couple more. We'll add a div there, and I think one more. This should go to the container. Yes, there we go. We'll go and save all of that. And that's all we should need to get this basic inbox created. Let's go ahead now and jump into our landing page, our landing nav bar, and create a link to go to this inbox page we created. So inside of our landing app, we'll go into our templates, landing, and into our nav bar to HTML. Now down here, we'll go ahead and add a link for this. So let's go to, we'll put this, I guess, right under our drop down right here. So we have our drop down here, we have our notifications. And right before the notifications, we'll add the link to the nav bar. So right here, I'll create a div, a class equaling, we'll do nav-item, and we'll do inbox-icon-container. This will be some custom styles we'll add in a second here. Now inside of this div here, I'm going to create href, URL, inbox. And then we'll add a class of inbox-icon. And that'll be a custom class we'll add later as well. Now inside of this A tag here, I want to go ahead and add a font awesome icon. So I'll add one that's called FA paper plane. So I'll create an I tag, add a class, and put FAR FA-paper-plane. And we'll go to close off both our tags here. And then let's go and close off this div as well. We'll go and save that. Now let's go ahead and jump to our CSS file to add these two custom styles that we added right here. So we'll come down into our CSS file, come to the bottom. Let's add a couple more styles down here. So first we'll add an inbox icon container. And inside of here, we will go ahead and add a margin-right of 15 pixels to create some space between it and the notifications. And that's all for the container. Below that, we'll add an inbox icon class, and this will have the styles for the actual icon itself. So we'll put a color of 333 to give it like a dark gray, and add a transition of 0.5 seconds. And then below this, we're gonna add some hover effects. So we'll do an .inbox icon :hover. And now inside of here, we'll add a transition of 0.5 seconds as well. Now let's go ahead and try this out and see how it works. And we have an error, looks like. I forgot to import some things. Looks like thread model cannot be imported from social.models. Let's double check that real quick. Oh, I accidentally messed my indents up here, and these are all inside my notification class. I'm gonna go ahead and pull these out. So let's go ahead and pull these out to there and save that. Now let's come back here and see what that fix that issue. Let's come back here and reload the page. And there we go. So now up here you'll see, or let's reload the page again. There we go. So now up here you'll see we have this icon here that turns blue, which is just the default once we hover over it. So now we have this nice little effect here. If we click on it right now, it takes us to your conversations. And right now there's nothing there because we haven't created anything, but we can start a conversation. And right now it's not taking us anywhere. Did we create a link for that? Let me just double check that. Oh, I made one issue here. I put list threads for both of these. That's why it's taking us to the same page. Let's put create thread for our actual create thread view. That would be helpful. Come back here, reload the page, and let's try that again. And so now here we have this form here we can use to actually create a user or a thread between two users. So first, let's jump into the admin page. Go to the admin page and let's look at our users. And we can just grab any user that we want really here. I'll grab just test5. I think I used that one before. So I'll use the test5 user here. So let's type in test5. Hit continue. And it looks like it just took us back here. So we probably have an error in our code somewhere. So let's go ahead and do something real quick. Let's come back to our views.py. And let's take away this try except for now to see if we get an error. And then I'll go ahead and just grab all of this here and just pull it back once and save that. Let's go ahead here, type in test5 and hit continue. Okay, so right now the error we're getting here is because we don't have a thread URL yet. So everything should be working fine. We just don't have this all set up yet. So let's go ahead and set that up now so we can actually see if this is all working. So I'm gonna go back here, put back the try except and uncomment those. And now we should be good to start creating our actual thread itself and a create message view to actually create a message inside of the thread. Okay, now to do this, we need to create a couple more views. So the first thing we'll do is we'll create that thread view so we can actually get to our thread. So let's go ahead and jump into our views.py. And we'll come down here to the bottom and we'll create a new class and we'll call this class thread view. And we'll pass in view. And now inside this thread view class, we're going to need one method. We'll just need just a get method. We'll put the actual post method for our create message in a different view. So all we need here is just a get method. So we'll do a def get, pass in self, pass in request, pass in star args and star quargs. And so now what we need to do in here is we'll need to create another form to actually send a message. And to do this, we'll go into our forms.py and we'll create a new message form. So pretty much the same as our thread form, except with a different field. So we'll do a class message form, forms.form. And now inside of here, we'll create a form that has a field of message. So down here, this one here, we'll do message equals forms.char field, and we'll pass in label equals nothing to get rid of the label, and a max length. I will set it to 1,000. That's the same that we set it inside of our models. So we'll do the same thing here. We'll save that, and that's all we need for that form. So back in our views.py, we're going to go ahead and instantiate this new form first. So we'll do form, whoops, let's fix our indents there. Form equals message form, like that. And we need to import this. So up here at the top, we'll import message form from our forms. So right here, I'll do message form. And now down here, I'm going to go ahead now and get the thread that we're on. And so inside of our get method here, we need to pass in PK. So up here, I'll pass in PK, and this will come from the URL. And now down here, let's go ahead and get that thread. So we'll do thread equals thread model dot objects dot get PK equals PK. And so this PK will match it with a thread primary key, and we'll just match that and get that object here. And this will be the thread that we're going to show on the screen. Next, we need to go ahead and we're going to grab all the messages that match this thread. And so we can do this by creating a variable. We'll call it message list equals message model dot objects dot filter. And then we'll do thread double underscore PK double underscore contains equals PK. And so what we're doing here is we're getting the thread object, we're getting the PK off that thread object, and we're seeing if that contains the PK that we have here, which is the same one that's in this thread that we want to show. And this double underscore syntax is just Django's syntax for doing this. You'll just have to get used to that for a while of using that. But all we're doing here is getting the PK and see if it contains the current PK that's passed in. If it is, it's one of the messages you want to show, and we'll return that into our list. Next, we'll create a context variable, and this context variable will have the thread, which we set the thread. It will have the form, which will be the form, and finally have the message list, which is just a list of messages we have here in message list. Now down here, let's go ahead and return render a template. Pass the request, and we'll create a social slash thread.html, passing our context. Let's go ahead now and create this thread template here. So inside of our social template social, we'll create a new file, and we'll save this as thread.html. So first things first, we want to go ahead and extend our base template. So we'll do right here, we'll do extends landing slash base.html. And then we'll go ahead and pass in load crispy forms tags. And now below this, we'll go ahead and do a block content. And we'll close off our block content. Do end block content. Inside of here, we're going to go ahead and create a container first. So we'll do a div with the class of container. Inside of here, we'll go ahead and create a row. Div class equals row. Inside this row, we'll create a card. So div class equals card column dash md dash 12 empty dash 5, and then padding dash 3, and then we'll add a shadow dash small again on this card. So what we'll do here is we'll show the user that's not the current user. So first, let's create an if statement. We'll do if thread.receiver is equal to request.user. If that is the case, we want to show the user on the thread. So then down here, we'll put a h5, and we'll do put in our template syntax here for a variable, and we'll put thread.user. And then over here, we'll do, if that's not the case, we'll do an else. So if the thread.user equals request.user, we want to show the thread.receiver. So right here, I'll do an and once again, put in a variable, thread.receiver. I actually need to close off these tags as well. I didn't close them off. And then down over here, I'll go ahead and end the if statement, doing an end if. So now let's go ahead and close off both of these tags here. We'll create a new row. But first, before we actually list all the messages out, we want to show some empty text if there's no messages here. We don't want to show a blank screen. We want to show that there's no messages. So I'm going to create an if statement here. Do if message list dot count or dot all dot count. So get all the messages and count how many there are. If it's equal to 0, then we want to do this. What we'll do is we'll show a div of a class of row margin y dash 5, put some spacing on the top and bottom of it. We'll create a div with a class of column dash md dash 12. Inside this column here, we'll add some paragraph text with a class of empty text, which we'll add some styles to in a second. And let's go ahead and just say no messages. We'll close off that p tag, close off the div, close off the row, and I'll close off the if statement. Just like that. Let's go ahead and add some styles to this real quick before we forget. So inside of our styles.css, we'll go ahead and add some things here to the bottom. Let's go ahead and do a .empty-text to match what we put in our HTML file. We'll set a color of a light gray. We'll do 777. We'll set a font size of, let's say, 1.5 rem. And we'll set a text align center to center it in the column there. There we go. And the next thing we want to do, we're going to jump back into our thread.html. We want to go ahead and loop through and show all of our messages, if there are any. So if there are any messages, this will show up here. So for message, in message list, go ahead and enter 4 before we forget, in 4. And now inside this for tag here, we're going to go ahead and create a row, div class equals row. Inside this row here, we'll create a column dash md dash 12 and an my dash 1. And inside of this column here, we want to check two things. We want to check if the logged in user is either the sender user or the receiver user. So back in our models.py, you'll see here that we have two different users on our message model. Oops, not those two, these two right here. So we have a sender user and a receiver user. If the user is the sender user, you want to show the message on one side. If they're receiving a message, you want to show on the other side, just to kind of differentiate between the two messages. So similar how most text message platforms are set up, where if you send it, it'll show up on the right. If you send it, it'll show up on the left. If you're receiving it, it'll show up on the right with a different color. We're gonna do the same thing here. So inside this div here, I'm gonna go ahead and do an if statement to check to see if the login user is either the sender or the receiver. So first we'll do if message dot sender user equals request dot user. If they are, we're going to put a div with a class of sent message, which we'll add some styles to later, and a margin y dash 3 to add some spacing between messages. And then we're going to just put a paragraph tag and put our variable here and just pass in the message dot body. So we'll just show the message body there. We'll close off this div. And then we're going to do an elif. Well, actually, we'll just do an else because there's only two options here. So else, or no, we'll do an elif here just to make it clear, I guess. And we'll do a message dot receiver user. So if they're the receiver user, we want to go ahead, put request equals request dot user. So if they're the receiver user, we want to go ahead and show it on a different side. So do a div with a class of received message and margin y dash 3. Now inside of here, we'll go ahead and just put a paragraph tag, open up our two curly braces for a Django variable, and we'll pass in message.body again, and close off this p tag. Close off this div, and then we'll close off our if statement here. End if. And then we'll go ahead and close off our row and close off our column, and I close off our row, and that ends the for loop right there. And so that will show all of our messages. We'll make the actual styles and make them show on the right size in our CSS. And so let's go ahead and just do that now before we forget. So let's jump into our style.css, and we'll add two different styles here. We'll put these right below our empty text. We'll do a .sent-message, and this will set the color to a light gray. So we'll do a background color of that div to be, we'll say F3, F3, F3. And then we'll do a border radius just to give it a kind of rounded corners there. We'll do 30 pixels. And then we'll go ahead and we'll add some padding. And we'll do, let's say, 10 px and then 25 px will work there probably. And we'll go ahead and add a width of 25% so it doesn't span the entire length of the screen or of the column, which is the entire screen. It's only going to go about 25% across the screen, which I think will look a little better that way. And that will be it for our sent message. Let's add another class for our received message. So dot received dash message. Now this one will have a background color of an RGB value. And I found this one ahead of time that I think will work well. It'll be a 1,196, 255, which would just be like a light blue color. And then we'll add a color of the text to be a white, just because we want it to stand out from the blue that we just added. And then we'll add a border dash radius of 30 pixels. And we'll add some padding again, same as before, 10 px, 25 px. Let's go add a width of 25% again, so it only takes the same amount of screen space. And now on this one, we're going to go ahead and do a float right. And so in this case, by default, it will show up on the left. So the sent message will show up on the left of the screen. But since we floated this one right, the received messages will show up on the right side of the screen. And so you'll get that effect where you have messages on one side versus the other based on who sent them. And that should be it for those two classes there. We'll go ahead and save that. Let's go back to our thread.html. There's one more thing we need to add here. We need to go ahead and add a form at the bottom where we can actually submit a message. So down here, we'll go ahead and open up another div here. So a div, a class of row. And inside of here, we'll create a div with a class of card. And we'll do a column -md-12, padding -3, and a shadow -small or -sm. And now inside of this class here, we're going to create a form with a method of post and an action, which will go to a view we haven't created yet, but we'll create here in a second. So we'll go and put it in now so we have it here. The URL, the name will be create message. I'm going to pass in an argument of thread.pk right there. And then you also want to add an inc type of multipart /form -data. And this will be used later when we add the image upload in a future video. Now that we have the form created there, inside this form, we want to add two things. First, a CSRF token that we need to in any Django project where we have a form with the method of post. So we'll just do CSRF_token. Now below this, we want to bring in our form. So instead of our views here, in our context, we already passed in this form variable we can use. So we'll use that here. And I'll go ahead and put a variable here and do form and use the pipe and put crispy to make it look better with our crispy forms. Now below that form there, we are going to go ahead and add a button to send the message. And once again, since we're using Bootstrap 5, I'm going to create a div with a class of d-grid and gap-2, the margin top -3. This will make it span across the entire block and add a little spacing from the message body and the actual button itself. Now inside of this div here, I'll create a button, and this button will have a class equaling to btn-light, and then a type equaling submit. And now inside of this button text here, we'll put send message like that. And we'll go ahead and close off this div, close off the form, close off the column, and close off the row. And then we also need to close off this container since we're at the end of the file, and we'll save that. And that is all of our thread.html code. That was a little more complicated, so hopefully that all made sense. All we're doing is we're showing a header here, depending on who the user is. We're getting all the messages. If they're 0, we'll show some empty text. We'll list through all the messages and show them on the left or right of the screen based off of who sent the message. And then we have a form here where we can submit a new message to the thread. With that done, let's go ahead and add a URL pattern for this template. So instead of our urls.py, down here, I'm going to go ahead and create another path. This will be an inbox slash, and you'll see in our URL, when we go into this, we added a thread.pk value. That's because in our URL here, we're going to add the pk as part of the URL. And this will just be the pk of the thread, just to uniquely identify this thread versus another. We also need to make sure we put our trailing slashes on these views as well that I forgot earlier. Let's go ahead now and import the view we just created. So up here at the top, I'll import thread view. Now let's go and come back over here, and let's go ahead and add this thread right here. Thread view.as_view. We'll give this a name equaling, and make sure we call this one thread. We need to make sure we call this thread because in our other views, we create a URL pattern with the name of thread, and that will match up with this URL path right here. Okay, and now let's go ahead and create our create message view and URL to finish up this first video. So back in our views.py, we're gonna go ahead and create one more view here. So we'll do a class equaling create message. This will inherit from view. And now inside this class here, we need just one method, and that's just a post method. So this view will not have a template. We will just redirect to whatever thread we need to go to. This will just have a separate view that we can send a request to and then redirect back to where we were previously. And so since we only need a post method, we can just do a def post, and we'll pass in self, request, pk, star args, and star quargs. Now inside this post method, first we want to get the thread from our URL, which will have this argument passed into it, which you saw that we did earlier right here. We passed in a thread.pk. So that's going to come right in here in this value, and we can grab that value and get the actual thread object itself. So we'll do a thread equals thread model.objects.get pk equals pk. And then we'll do if thread.receiver equals the request.user. Then we'll set the receiver equal to the thread.user. Else, if they're not, then we'll set the receiver equaling to the thread.receiver. So what we're doing here is we're checking to see who the thread.receiver is. If they are the current user, then we'll set the receiver equal to the thread.user. And if they're not, we'll set the receiver to the thread.receiver. So all we're doing here is make sure we have the correct receiver set up based on who is the receiver on this thread. Hopefully that makes sense. The way it's set up might be a little confusing, but in our models, one user is set to user and one is set to receiver. We don't want to set the receiver of the message to be the thread.user at all times, because then it might be the same user that's actually sending this message. So we're just making sure the correct user is receiving the message. After that, we can go ahead and create the message itself. So we'll do a message equals message model with some parentheses, and now inside of this message model, let's go ahead and add some things. So first we'll set the thread equal to the thread. We'll set the sender user equal to the request.user. We'll set the receiver user equal to the receiver. And finally, we'll set the body now be equal to the request.post.get. Pass in the message there. So all we're doing here is just getting the thread that we got earlier, set the equal to the thread. The sender will always be the request.user, because whoever's submitting this form will always be the sending user. And the receiver user is whoever's not the current user. So we find that on our thread, just do this logic up here. And then finally we get the body, and we can get the message from the post request, set that equal to the body. After all that, we can go and save this message. So down here I can do a message.save. And then we go and return redirect to the thread and pass in the pk equals pk. And so all we're doing here is we want to go back to the thread URL. We want to go to the same URL that we were just on. So whatever was passed in here is the same one that we were just on. We can set that down here and to go back to that view or to that URL. Let's go ahead and save that now. Let's create a URL pattern for this and try everything out. So first, once again, we need to import this at the top here. So up here, I'll go ahead and import create message. And then we'll come back over here and we'll create a new view. So right here, we'll create a path, be inbox slash, and we'll do int pk to get the current thread. And we'll do slash create dash message. And now we'll go ahead and use that create message view that we just created, not create thread, but create message that as underscore view, pass a name equaling to create dash message. Make sure you put a comma there and save that. And now that should be it, I believe. I think everything else should be set up. Let's go ahead and give it a shot now and see how everything works. So first, we'll go back here and we'll add a test 5 and we'll hit continue. And we're getting an error with message model not defined. That's because I forgot to import it. So let's go ahead and make sure we import that real quick. Go to our views, come here to the top. We'll find our models and we'll add message model right here. Save that. Let's come back and try this again. Come back, reload the page, start a conversation as test 5, and there we go. Now we have a thread here. It says at test 5 in this top card. It says no messages because we haven't sent any message yet. We have a form field here where we can send a message. So let's go ahead and send one real quick and hit send. And we're getting an error. It looks like I mistyped something. I put a lowercase m. I caught that already. I didn't see that. Let's go ahead and fix that real quick. So we'll come down here and find where we messed that up at right here. Let's change this to a capital M. Let's go and try sending this message again. Come back here, reload the page, type hi in, hit send message, and there it shows up right there. And every message we will show on the left in this gray text. And we can send more and more just like that. Let's go ahead real quick and log out of our admin user and sign in with our test 5 user and see how these look over there. So go ahead and sign out to our test 5 user. And now let's go ahead and jump into our inbox. We'll see we already have a thread here for the one that we just created. We'll click on that. And now they show up over here in this blue color. If we were to say something else over here and send that, it shows up over here in the gray color. So now we have this sort of back and forth look here, kind of like a text message thread with how our messages look. And we could probably clean up the indents a little bit or the spacing a little bit if we wanted to, but for now we'll leave it as it is just for its basic functionality, just to make sure everything's working. And it looks like everything's working pretty well right now. So that's really going to be it for this video. We can go and log back out and look at the admin user and see how this looks over there. It should just look the opposite of what we had here. So we jump into there, click on this thread here, and you'll see now we have the hello user showing up over here. Now, right now, this is all we have. There could be some more features we could add that make this a lot better, which we'll add later. But for now, this is a good stopping point. We have a basic sort of text message thread system set up here where we can send messages to users. Now, there's one more thing to check real quick to make sure everything's working. We shouldn't have had more than one conversation created. I hit that button a few times to try to create a test 5 conversation. Let's make sure it didn't create more than one. So to check this, we'll jump into our Sublime Text Editor, jump into our admin.py in our app here. Let's bring in our thread model. Let's go ahead and register on our admin site, and we'll check it out there. So admin.site.register thread model. Now let's go ahead and go into our admin page here, reload the page, click on thread models, and there's only one. So it worked very well. It only created one thread. So that logic we worked there did work well, and it only created one there. So perfect. So everything's working great. And so that's where we're going to stop for today. The code will be in the description below, as well as a link to the written tutorial. We'll come back here soon, hopefully within the next week or so, and add another video where we'll add some more features to this and make this more user-friendly, add some notifications and just some other things that will sort of add the features that you would normally expect in most direct messages on social media platforms. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.